Greetings and salutations. You are listening to the Into North podcast, where we take a look at the competitive side of the format of Commander, also known as cEDH. I am one of your hosts, Reed, aka Sicko Robot, and today I am joined by my co-hosts, Matt, aka Null.
What's up?
And Morgan, aka Spleenface.
How's it go?
You may notice that I do not normally do the intro here, and that's because we are missing Lyndon today, unfortunately. Lyndon, aka Noobsource. But we will power through without him, and we're going to get this one done anyway.
Yeah.
Pretty much. So yeah, in this episode, we're going to be covering theoretical rules changes to the EDH format. Like stuff that has been talked about for a long time now. Stuff like, Planeswalkers as commanders, hybrid mana, that kind of stuff. But we'll get into that later. And we're just going to give, our look at it, give a breakdown in relation to cEDH, all that good stuff. But before we get into any of that, what have you guys been up to?
Slowly turning into a potato.
Oh, I get it.
I've just been out, partying and, gathering in large groups with lots of people who have
trying
traveled
to
a lot recently, going on flights and cruises,
Nice.
as one does.
That
Making
sounds pretty
sure
fun.
not to cough into your elbow.
Yeah,
of course,
absolutely.
never observing personal hygiene guidelines.
What even is washing your hands? That sounds exhausting. They'd be all wet, wouldn't they?
Can't do anything about that.
No. But yeah, we're in the middle of pandemic season here. We're holed up.
Our infect episode, right?
Hey. God. And terrible jokes.
That joke's never gonna get old, right?
Never.
How
ever,
long
ever
would the
gonna get old.
quarantine have
No.
to last
God.
for that to get old?
I'm already at 10 poison counters, dude. You don't have to keep going here.
I've been thinking about doing tuning on my terrible tempo deck, but I haven't, and that's been my life for the past however long. Great.
Yeah,
So that out of the way.
quarantine's randomly kept me busy. I don't know. I feel like I would expect to have done more deck building, but I just have done less.
Just haven't.
Yeah.
I mean, that's because a new path expansion dropped. Who are you trying to
Oh yeah,
believe?
that's right.
Oh right, that part. Yeah, there's a new
Right.
TFT set that just dropped recently, so been playing that a bunch. So that's fun.
Nice.
Yeah, but without any further ado, let's jump into housekeeping. So we have some new patrons, and we'd like to say thank you. So let me say thank you to Sonara.
Thank you to Starway Man.
Thank you to Jake B.
And thank you to Zach W. You rock.
Except for you, Zach.
That should be it for housekeeping. Methinks. New developments. Morgan, I think you've been keeping up to date with this one the most.
Yeah, sure. So we got a new edition of the cEDH staples from the crew over at Playing with Power, where they look at the top database decks and pull out the list of cards that occur in, I forget exactly what the threshold is, but enough of them. You will not be surprised to learn that Thassa's Oracle is quickly gaining in popularity, as is Underworld Breach, since a couple months ago, when they had just been spoiled or released. I'm not exactly sure when the last update was.
It was before then, yes.
Yeah. Laboratory Maniac is falling off in popularity because Oracle's just better. And it's just an interesting look at, the breakdown of what cards are being played. It's also useful if you're thinking about, buying cards for your deck and you are thinking you might want to switch decks in the future, looking at which of the staples you can buy that keep your options open. So we'll make sure to link that and go and check that out. And also go and check out the rest of Playing with Power's content, because they're pretty awesome.
Definitely. Awesome content creators, and, actual resource creation is huge. Not everybody does that. It's great. We certainly don't.
Whoopsie.
Yes. Also, like something that was sort of neat just from the data that came out of that is like the huge climb in force negation getting played, which is like sort of like an unexpected side effect, I guess, of I would think like Oracle starting to see more play, right?
Yeah, it's definitely interesting.
Like it's sort of cool. Like it's just something that you wouldn't have necessarily expected going into seeing Oracle spoiled and like Hulk being put into much more decks, but I guess like it sort of makes sense in retrospect that it would be gaining popularity. Like you want to combat other people's early win attempts as much as possible. Yeah. So that is about it for new developments. Let's get into our main topic. Main topic for today, as I said before, rules changes, potential rules changes, things that we aren't changing the actual cards themselves, but changing the format and potentially like small little tweaks here and there, and like how they would affect cEDH, how they might affect cEDH in regards to like EDH, and like compare them a bit. Because they're pretty interesting,
we're
right?
Yeah, we're gonna be looking at the ones that Mark Rosewater used in his head-to-head series, which is just a bracket where people vote on their options. His original list had 16. That's a lot. We're not going to go over all of them, but we're going to touch on most of the important ones, I think. And, we'll spend more time on the ones that we think are more interesting.
Yeah, definitely the ones that we think would have more of an effect on cEDH. Because that's what this podcast is about. So, yeah. So we're going to get over a few of the ones first that don't really have a huge impact, or either like don't have a huge impact, we think, on cEDH, or we've already talked to death, and just like sort of get those out of the way first, and then we'll get into the juicier stuff later. So stuff like affecting like commander damage, and then they're like making it a higher amount, lower amount, removing it completely, all that stuff. I mean, it definitely would have an effect on like casual EDH, and I think like maybe lowering it would have an effect on cEDH depending on how far it gets lowered.
I think it would have to go way down.
Yeah, but it would have to go like very far down, and it would also like removing it or making it higher just basically has no effect on the format.
Yeah, I think the threshold where like 4 power commanders get into the 3-hit club,
yeah,
would be like where it starts to matter.
Sure.
I can definitely say, having experienced that 12 commander being the limit is like, that's where certain commanders start to have just like a very real upside kind of unintentionally. And like, that could potentially be good just to sort of put pressure on and like get the game moving. Notably, even just going down like a few might enable certain decks. Like, like Kenrith is currently plausible to kill in 3 hits, but you do have to sink a fair amount of mana to do that.
Yeah.
If it went down to like 18, that might be a little easier for something like that.
I think 18 also makes, just from my experience recently in playing this deck, Frog, yes, but also like Ishai, I think bring it down, like even those 3 points makes it a lot more feasible to 2-shot with Ishai rather than having to 3-shot, which is what I've sort of experienced, is like, if you're going to kill people with Ishai, usually you kill the first person with 3 hits, and then you have to kill like the next person with 2 hits once people have cast a few more spells. But like, I think reducing it like 18, like 16 potentially, makes it a lot more feasible that you just get it done in 2.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Nell, do you have like do you have any thoughts on that, about like in the context of like Bruce Tarl?
Yeah, Mr. Bruce Tarl player.
I mean, yeah, I guess Bruce has kind of just been a life gain tool for me at this point.
Fair. But like, would you see it more as like a commander damage thing if it got lowered enough?
Yes, yeah, I would.
Yeah. Okay.
I think you'd want to. I think there would actually be a viable pairing with something else. Possibly a Shy or something.
Bruce
like I don't know.
If it went to 16, and then you could do Bruce Kron.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
Oh,
that'd be
God.
that'd be sweet. Yeah, that'd be sweet.
That'd be nuts. Yeah, so like commander damage not huge unless it really gets lowered, which isn't really the way that it would be going, I would think, for casual EDH especially.
Yeah,
I
where
mean,
like Ural is like playable.
yeah, like potentially, but I think like a lot of the time people are looking at commander damage alterations for EDH as like raising it or getting rid of it completely. So the next one here is the same thing but for with infect. Again, like I think it's sort of the same case. Like getting rid of it doesn't really affect us. Like increasing it doesn't really affect us.
Genuinely, I even think even if it was lowered so that dealing 10 points of infect damage spread across your 3 opponents killed, that
Like-
still wouldn't
like
make
won you
infect
the game.
viable.
Like you deal 3 poison counters and you win.
Or I mean, I guess maybe 3 still, like 4. Like even if Skitherix was a one shot, I still
Sure.
don't think that
Oh
infect
my
would be
God.
viable in CEDH.
I am
Like
willing
it'd be
to,
miserable. You could just kill one person, but
dude. I'll make a Skitherix deck with that rule, and we'll see. I'd be willing to try it.
no, you'll just hit me every time, and then you'll lose to someone else. Come on.
Yeah, I think like
I wasn't born yesterday.
I think like potentially if you lower it enough, like maybe you have like some case to be made for Traxa, but like, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I guess if you could just put one counter on something and then, or like one poison counter on someone and then try and proliferate them to death. But even
And like
then,
do it in a reasonable time span.
even then,
Yeah, it's still like super rough. Yeah, it would have to be so low to make it worth playing in CDH that it would just like absolutely ruin casual tables.
Yeah, absolutely.
Next one that we have here is no deck size limit. So just, you know, not being limited to 100 cards. You have to play 100 cards, but you can play more if you want to.
like every other format.
Like every other format. I don't really think this has any effect on us.
Nope.
I think it makes it so it makes it obvious when people are playing bad decks because they're playing like 101 cards. But like
Dude, my
aside from
Battle
that
of
for
Wits
CDH,
commander deck.
yeah, I don't think it really has much of an effect. I mean,
No effect.
like I would definitely love to like try to make Battle of Wits work, but like no.
Unless they built some, or they started designing some like really powerful commanders based on deck size. But but even then, it's like it's yeah.
Oh, okay, so but Zur can get Battle of Wits.
Yeah,
Just the best time.
rules changes. Yeah,
Yeah, I can see it like having niche applicability for like EDH, but like basically nothing for CDH. You pretty much always want to be playing the minimum deck size anyway.
Yeah, I mean, like in cutthroat formats like Vintage and Legacy, you're allowed to play more cards than the limit. And how often does that happen?
Yeah, basically never. Almost never. Yeah.
almost never.
Almost never. This one I don't believe was on the head to head. Might have been. No, I don't think. Excuse me. Don't think it was. But we just wanted to put it in here because we've talked about it before and we didn't really want to go in depth about it again because we'd sort of talked about it a fair amount on an earlier episode. This being partner tax, so
No,
taxing.
it was on there. It was on there.
Huh? Was it? Okay.
It's on there. Third from the bottom.
Sure. Okay, gotcha. But you know, like taxing partners collectively in commander tax or something like that, just altering how commander tax affects partners. I mean,
Yes,
yeah,
please.
we've sort of talked about it ad nauseum. I think the general sentiment is yes, please do, but you know, it sort of affects EDH in a sort of undesirable way, I think, for a lot of people that play
I think
partners.
the real problem is that it very negatively affects the partners with commanders who are like much more reasonably costed and designed around
Yeah.
that. Like,
You'd basically just be applying it to fix specifically Thrasios Tymna, because when you get up to like I'm playing like Ikra Crom. Oh no, I cast Ikra and now Crom costs 7 mana. Like
Yeah, or like and then Krav and Regna or whatever. It's like, like the Battlebond ones. I think the cheapest combination is like 7 or 8 mana. So
yeah, it's just like it becomes impossible, which sucks,
Which I think is also, like we mentioned this the last time we talked about this, is just like poor design with the partners where you have this extra card, but when you make them low cost, even if they're balanced around that low cost, which they're not, but even if they were, having them be low cost means it's more likely that that extra card manifests itself in a given game. Whereas even if you had a balanced 4-drop and a balanced 5-drop as commanders, it's just like so much more effort to cast both your commanders to get that advantage.
Or even like a powerful 4-drop and a powerful 5-drop, right?
Yeah, like if you had like Kess and Momir Vig as your commander, or like, I mean, obviously those don't synergize at all,
but yeah, still like if you
in order to
so
cast
hard,
them both, you're committing a huge amount of resources.
It's so hard to build a deck to take advantage of like 9 mana worth of commanders, as opposed to just like 5 mana total worth of commanders that both do things.
Play this one on turn 2 off a dork, play this one on turn 3 while drawing a card off the other one, and hold up 2 mana for a counterspell. Seems fair.
Or something more malicious than a counterspell.
Yeah.
But yeah.
The counterspell that counters the game existing and being ongoing.
Exile all permanents and spells your opponents control. Remove abilities they control from the stack. So like that was sort of like this stuff that we wanted to gloss over. We'll get to some of the other ones that we aren't going to be fully talking about later, but those are the ones that, like sort of don't have a huge effect on cEDH, or, we've talked about, and it probably wouldn't be happening for EDH.
Do we want to just quickly go over the ones that we're not gonna get into, and then we can talk about the more interesting ones?
Yeah,
sure.
Just mention them.
Like, do those first.
Oh yeah.
So the first one we're gonna skip because it would be dumb is silver bordered cards being legal. Silver bordered cards are dumb.
Very dumb.
I'm sure there are some.
Necro Impotence is a card.
Yep, pretty much. Aesthetic Consultation is also a card. I have no desire to have that card in the format.
Yeah. There's a lot of silliness. You'd have to ban a ton of cards to keep things in check.
Yeah. Enter the Dungeon. It's another great one. Just incredibly unfun. All that stuff. And then there's sort of some other ones that are like a bit vague, and like it's not really like a specific targeted change for us to talk about that we won't really be getting into, which is mulligan changes in general. There are a whole lot of ways to change mulligans that, we could talk about for probably an entire episode if we really wanted to, but there's not really a specific
speculation.
one to talk about. Yeah, pretty much.
What if we played with 9 card hands?
Yeah.
I think it's reasonable to say I'm decently happy with the mulligan as it exists now.
Yeah, I think the London
actually
was like a pretty real improvement on previous mulligans, and I think it's like fairly balanced and helps games be real.
It's definitely much more balanced than partial Paris, and much less punishing than Vancouver.
Yeah, I'm rarely going below 6 these days. There's like with the one free, there's just so many opportunities to pick a good hand.
Yeah, especially when like your deck has a high density of quality cards, or like especially if your deck has a lot of redundancy and you're just like fishing for specific things, it helps a lot. And then the second one for this category is just 4th player advantage, or just like later player advantage. Again, there are a lot of ways to approach this one. We could again probably spend another episode talking about this and try to balance out first player advantage, but that's basically a problem in every game with turns ever designed and ever created. So I mean, there's just so many ways to handle.
Particularly hard because it's 4 players, so you kind of need like a scaling. Like if you just disadvantage the first player, then the second player generally has an advantage, or if you just advantage the 4th player, the 3rd player has the biggest disadvantage. So we'd have to come up with some scale.
You have to figure out a way for it to not just be musical chairs, which is like fairly difficult. So
right.
yeah, let's get into the real meat and potatoes of this discussion now, shall we? Because there's some gems in here, and I think there's some stuff in here that we haven't talked about on the podcast before that deserves it, and is something.
But there is one that we have talked about on the podcast, and that is Planeswalkers as commanders. But we weren't talking about cEDH. We were talking about the doubles tournament.
But this time, I swear, we're actually talking about cEDH for once, which I know is a rarity on a podcast that touts to be talking about cEDH. But you know, we got there eventually. Yeah. So Planeswalkers commanders. I mean, there's been a lot of discussion about this for like years at this point. I think like even before they printed Teferi and whoever like the can be your commander of Planeswalkers, people have sort of wanted this. And it makes sense, you know, from a flavor perspective. They're all like characters in the same way that legendary creatures are. They all like sort of fit the role of commander. So like, why or why not?
Also, from this list, I think this is probably the most probable outcome. Like based on recent set design, like they're really pushing Planeswalkers, and like if players can't go and play their favorite Planeswalkers outside, you know, their drafts, or you know, if they're just playing kitchen table, like it seems like almost too perfect.
Yeah, definitely. And especially since we've seen stuff like, you know, like Brawl let you play Planeswalkers in the command zone in like other sort of variant formats.
Yeah, and that definitely wasn't the issue with Brawl.
No,
like,
definitely.
There are issues
definitely
with Brawl,
not.
but that wasn't it.
Yeah, like Brawl, Oathbreaker, that kind of stuff, you know? It's just like, I think in the formats that they've been legal in, the commanders haven't necessarily been the issue in those formats. There have definitely been other issues, and I think the commanders are fairly well balanced, especially for a multiplayer format where, like, historically it's also like very difficult to keep commanders alive anyway, just from like random dorks sitting around. Like you have to put a fairly real amount of, you know, like a fairly real amount of investment into keeping them alive, as we've seen with stuff like Teferi. You know, Matt knows that pain.
Yeah. Just Planeswalkers are also like pretty color locked, like usually 2 colors, some 3 color ones, like so they are kind of in a disadvantage, especially considering how many like powerful 4 and 5 color commanders there are that are available. But I think some of them have some pretty strong abilities.
Oh yeah, like, I mean the classic example is Tezzeret the Seeker, right?
Yeah.
Which I think recently actually got an infinite combo and then got it immediately taken away from him in Paradox Engine.
Well, like you can always just -4 to get Scepter, and then you have an infinite outlet, right?
Yeah, like you just have to find Dramatic Reversal, which is pretty easy
in
to
blue,
find. In those colors.
I think there's would be an interesting Ashiok Dream Render console list, like that card just being a strong kind of, you know,
just like anti-Hulk stuff.
Yeah,
it'd be sort of neat. I don't think you have to find ways to keep her alive again, but like, yeah, it'd be sort of cool.
Yeah, I don't think anything would make any particularly large waves in competitive. But in casual, you know, there is some truth to the expressed concern that everything just slows down. Like sweepers are already pretty prevalent, and then having people consistently have Planeswalkers, and then sweepers become even more prevalent to protect the Planeswalkers. Like they want people attacking. I think you'd also have to ban, at the very least, Doubling Season, potentially also Deep Glow Skate, just because that's no fun for anyone.
Yeah,
there's I made a list of like all the commanders and how all the Planeswalkers that instantly ult with Doubling Season that are green. There's like 2 or 3 of them that basically guaranteed win you the game pretty much instantly. And then there's several that are like, if you're in any sort of reasonable position, you probably just win. And then, you know, they go down from there. But
yeah, that is fair. I think they were, especially for a casual EDH, there'd probably have to be some amount of banless tailoring to fit them in to that role. But I'm fairly sure that it would be worth it. That being said, like I think Sheldon's taken the stance that he'll never allow Planeswalkers to be in the command zone, and I think that is shared by a few more of the RC, I believe.
Yeah.
But
Actually, they're really against it.
Yeah. Which, I mean, there is an argument for, right? Like, especially, it doesn't follow the initial lines of the format. There are, like, Planeswalkers printed with "this can be your commander" on them.
Yeah.
And it sort of takes away from that a bit. It makes it weird. But, yeah, I don't know. I feel like there would be some pretty cool stuff with commanders. I think maybe, like, the one that would be problematic potentially in casual would be Narset, just because it sort of does the Leovold thing in a similar way.
Yeah, it's no fun.
Yeah.
Though it's like much less good than Leovold.
Yeah,
definitely much less good considering it's in 2 fewer colors and you could beat it to death fairly easily instead of having to have removal on the spot. But yeah, like it just does not fun things in the command zone in a similar fashion. So yeah, I don't know.
Dude, but you ready to play against my Ugin the Spirit Dragon deck?
Oh boy.
Oh, God. I want to see it, but I don't want to play against it.
Just Ugin in the command zone with a Painter Servant.
Yeah, nice.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, so I think it's a good capstone for Planeswalkers as commanders. I mean, it's a fairly interesting subject. There's
I think it only adds to the format. It doesn't take away.
Especially for CEDH, yeah, definitely adds to the format. Gives us more complexity. Gives us like more reasons to do things. Maybe like it actually lets us play Humility for once in one of the decks somewhere. Yeah. Next up on this list that we have is another classic debate topic for the CEDH rules, or EDH rules in general, rather, which is hybrid mana. It's a fun one.
Yeah, I think it's one of those topics where you kind of have to like look at a list of all the possible like strong cards, and maybe it only helps like monocolor decks that really need support. I think it's only a plus.
So, I mean, there's like non-zero amounts of rules baggage associated with it, which is like I understand why they don't want to implement it. I think it being implemented, assuming you could implement it cleanly, wouldn't be a huge. I mean, like you'd see Vexing Shusher in a lot of decks, which is like
it's the big one.
That's like
something that I think is an issue.
Like I know Mark Rosewater has said frequently it's frustrating to him that like they can't use hybrid cards to shore up the weaknesses of like monocolor decks in that way in Commander. Like that's the way they try and use them in their design, and it's like, oh, that just doesn't work.
And like especially because like it means that like they have to print, if they want to like give 2 separate colors like a monocolored effect to bolster them, they have to do it on 2 cards instead of 1.
Yeah, like what's the naturalized / disenchant that's hybrid mana?
Oh yeah,
like, whatever that card's called. Yeah. They can't, if they wanted to do that. Well, obviously those effects already existed, but if they wanted to do that with a new card, they'd have to print it in both the colors rather than like, oh, here's something you can both use.
Yeah. Not a huge amount of fun. And yeah, I think like the main issue that we'd see in like a CEDH perspective is Vexing Shusher going into everything. Which I think is like a symptom of Flash, I'd say. But even without Flash, it's probably a bit toxic.
I think it's worse, honestly, without Flash.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, sorry. Like, I think it's like a stronger card when Flash isn't in the format.
Oh, sure. Just just forcing through.
Like it'll actually be involved in more games, I think, that way, and that it'll be more obvious that it's a problem.
Just because people in general are less mana restricted.
Yeah, that being said, the idea of giving more ways to make flash uncounterable is just
also just not a fun idea.
Yes.
Hard pass.
I think the other one that's big for cEDH specifically is giving Deathrite Shaman to pretty much every deck in the format.
No, that doesn't work because it has proper symbols.
That is
which is
true.
one of the rules baggage issues that you'd have to have to write the rule cleanly so that people weren't confused about Deathrite Shaman.
Yeah. And
I think Reaper
also,
King in every single deck would be an issue.
Also, they're like what can every deck run, like the colorless hybrid spells like Beseech the Queen? Can they go in like a mono blue deck or?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's not much of an issue, but yes, like
can
could
they? Can?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Like I've seen people argue both ways.
Yeah.
Under like a proposed change. Anyways.
Yeah. It depends on how it's done.
Yeah, it's one of the big ones. Is like I think there are a couple of things on this list here where it's like, yes, it could be interesting, but there's also a ton of rules baggage associated with it that like maybe doesn't resolve cleanly and would have to have like a lot of work put into it to make it happen. That being said, there's also a card that we were talking about in the pre-show, which is Repudiate Replicate. Which, if it was only hybrid mana on the second part, and this rule was in place, dude, Stifle and Mono Green.
My goodness, we're going deep.
Yeah, that's about all I have to say, though. I think, like, before Oracle got printed, I probably would have been a bit more hyped about this just because of Mr. Painful Goblin Boy. Murderous Redcap, there we go. Murderous Redcap is a pretty interesting card to have in non-red talk decks. But yeah, I mean that's pretty much a non-factor anymore.
Yeah, it used to be, I think.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Back in 2018.
In the years of old. Yeah. So that's hybrid mana. Again, I could probably take it or leave it. Whatever. I think it's just unlikely to happen because of their stance on it, rather than any actual impact.
The rules
on the
are.
Yeah.
I think it's very easy for the RC to argue that the benefits are so not worth the rules cost and complexity cost that are associated with it.
Makes sense to me.
Absolutely.
Next one that we got on this list here is changing life totals. Now, this is a big one. I know we've heard a lot about this rules change, like potential rules change in the past as like, I've seen it like passed around in a lot of discussions about like asking people like, if you could do anything to the format, what would you do to it? And I think like a big one, especially like pre-Flash unbanning, or rather pre-Hulk unbanning, was changing the life total and making it lower to help counteract Nas decks being too good, and help counteracting like Nas being too good of a card.
What a more innocent time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's funny because I feel like decks have kind of like the current set of decks kind of have adapted to, dealing enough damage to all the Nas decks that the card actually kind of fell out of favor in that sense. Not necessarily because it became like a worse card now that Flash is as good as it is now.
I mean, Nas is still very much played.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like, I'm not saying it's not played because it still is good. Like you can't get like it's certainly a staple, but I do actually think it's being dealt with well by the current set of decks.
Yeah, I mean, I'd sort of agree with that. I feel like it's a lot. Like I think there's a lot more creatures in the format now just to deal with Tymnas in general, which by extension helps deal with Nas decks a lot more effectively.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I feel like it might still be like of note that decreasing the life total could help.
I mean,
I do too. Yeah.
I wouldn't object to it going down a bit.
Like I think
I would object to it going down like a lot.
Sure, like going down to like 20 or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. I think like
So you wouldn't or would object to
I
that?
would
Sorry.
object.
would.
Yeah, okay, yeah, okay.
I think like
But like
20 is probably a bit
35
low, but like yeah, like I think
Yeah,
like
I think
anywhere in
30
the
is my
zone from like
lowest.
I think like 25 is probably my low, up to like
Oh,
35.
wow. Okay, I think 25. The problem is that like the decks that lean, like the decks that lean on Nas and Necro as opposed to just sort of splash them, like aren't the problem decks.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean,
Right?
like
that's
I definitely don't think that 25 is correct, but I could see arguments to go down that low. I think probably like where I would like it if I had total control is probably like 35 to 30. Somewhere in that area.
Okay. How high would they have to go before you were like, this is a problem?
Before Adnos becomes the issue.
51?
I think 50 is already like so much of a boot. I think 50 already makes Shimmerzer way more of a real deck.
I mean, 51 just means I can nuke someone.
Could you imagine going back like 2 years and explaining to someone that this is how we'd be talking about Shimmerzer? Like,
yeah,
no, it'd be like actually good.
It could bring it back into viability and make it not so bad. But yeah, like I feel like 50 it like makes it a problem. 50 makes it so like Nas is a thing that you should just have in your deck no matter what you're doing.
Yeah, it's fair.
I think like 46 is already at that point. Like
40,
it
specifically
actually
46.
doesn't even take that much. Like I don't think it takes that much.
So I mean, I guess the question is like currently, I don't think decks that are well, okay, with the exception of Flash Hulk decks that run Nas. If we look at like all the other decks that aren't like you definitely have to build around your Nas's being consistent if that's what you're trying to do. Like Tasigur is not like when Tasigur casts a Nas, I'm like it's a coin flip. Or they might win, but they like it's very real that they don't win. So does giving Tasigur 5 more points on their Nas like change that?
I think it probably does. I mean, on average, that's giving them 4 more cards? 3 more cards?
Let's say like they have an average CMC of non-lands like probably reasonably close to 2. So
Oh, really? Okay. So like
well,
like
that would be. I mean, that's my guess. I'm not certain.
Okay.
On that. Like,
I think it's a bit lower. I think it's like 0.8, 0.7 to 0.8.
I think if you have Adnaz and you also have red, like I think any more life is too much life.
Yeah, I think that's sort of the issue. Is that like I don't think it brings the splash Nas decks into a point where they're too strong, but I think it brings the decks that already use Nas comfortably well to a point where it's too good of a card.
but like I don't know, they seem to already win like the vast majority of their Nases.
Yes, but
Like-
it's for me it's more like it just gives you license to increase the card quality in your deck.
I guess yeah. So it's
Right.
like you're worried that like taking Kess Storm or like some like Kess deck and just being able to trim like a couple rituals is like the problem.
It's just like you don't
That's
have to concede that you need to keep your CMC below a certain point, and it's more like, oh, okay, well, like in that case, I'm going to play these 6 mana payoffs as well as my Nas, or like just like 2 6 mana payoffs as well as my Nas.
and like yeah, or like I can cut like maybe Cabal Ritual and Lotus Petal or whatever. Yeah, that's fair.
Just stuff like that. Yeah, it's less that like Nas becomes better because like it already wins the game a vast majority of the time, and more that like you just have to build around it less, and it's more of an issue that way. That being said, how low would you guys think is like better in the context of like regular EDH? Because I think like regular EDH could probably handle a fair amount of life total lowering as well.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like so that you don't need to be playing like giant things to. I mean, so this is the problem is that like if you make aggro like actual aggro, not mid-range beatdown.
Yeah, like actual
sort of if you make that like a strategy that
tasty
people
creatures
want to play, then the game loop that you're resigning yourself to is that very often someone's getting eliminated early, and then the aggro player isn't getting there, and the game's lasting for a while.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Which is and so I guess the format, you could lose a lot of life and have it be balanced, but it would be a lot less fun.
Fair. It's a lot less like Christmas Landy and a lot less like I get to do whatever I want in this format, and more like, oh, there's an actual thing that I have to deal with.
I think it's I don't think there's if you want to enable aggro, I don't think lowering the commander damage or lowering the life totals is necessarily the right way. And for the same reason that Morgan mentioned, which is like you're going to find that a single player gets eliminated much early in the game, and they're sitting idly. There should be some other incentive.
Yeah,
that's fair. Yeah, I think that was fairly comprehensive for life totals. The next one that we have up here, this is a big one. This one that again doesn't. I don't think this one gets talked about as something that needs to be added or talked about in the context of adding it to the format or talking about how it should be integrated into the format, and more about people being confused about if it is already in the format or not when they first get into EDH and cEDH. But wish boards, basically like sideboards, but without other games. Basically just so that you can use wishes Burning Wish, Cutting Wish, Karn. And pull a card to the sideboard for those cards. Yeah, I mean,
I think we're mostly talking about Karn here.
Yeah, I think before Karn, this is probably more of a talking point, just because wishes are significantly worse in Singleton, I think, where they're tutors for. They're it turns Burning Wish into basically a demonic tutor, but it's only for the second tier of the effects that it can be getting. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's for silver bullets generally.
Yeah, for Cutting Wish, you would never put a Psycrypt in the sideboard for a Cutting Wish, because you'd probably be playing it in the main board already. So you're looking through you're coming through a bunch of these effects where yeah, I probably want redundancy for these effects that are in my deck so I can use this as an actual tutor, but the cards that I'm getting with this are all going to be worse than the ones that I'm already running in my deck because I can't also put them in the sideboard. And then you take that hit in exchange for getting access to more niche effects that you don't want to draw.
Yeah, most of these just aren't that good. I think Living Wish is probably the one that has Living Wish has a decent amount of appeal because there are it's much more reasonable to have silver bullet creatures than it is to have silver bullet blue instance in the same way.
Yeah.
You have bounce spells and counter spells, and those can kind of answer everything. But you could just I'll pull Collector Roof or Scavenging Ooze, or
I'm not sure I'd ever put a Collector Roof in the board. Maybe.
Well, I mean, what if I was on a deck that didn't want to play Collector Roof and was on Living Wish?
Right? Oh, sure. But just have access to this to go get in the
Collector Roof, Scavenging Ooze, whatever.
Yixlid Jailer, sure.
Yixlid Jailer, sure. Or Glittering Wish is also kind of a fun one.
Yeah, I think Glittering Wish is.
I love Glittering Wish because it just promotes playing slightly offbeat cards to meet its condition.
Yeah, and you can, and your multicolored slots are good if you have fuse cards or whatever, which generally speaking are multicolored.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think we'd see Fae of Wishes played in Urza, but also I think we'd see it played in Razaketh type decks where it's you either need to discard the fatty or you need to tutor for the reanimation spell, and it kind of does a bit of both.
I would also at least test it in Kess because of how stupid that interaction is.
Yeah, being able to cast a wish out of your bin every turn.
And then exile it and then play it. And, oh, baby. sponsor Rulamog working would be nice for people who like that.
In casual. But
Mastermind's acquisition would just become $1 billion instantly.
Yeah, pretty much. But after talking about all of that, now we get to the actual issue in this rules change, which is Karn. And yeah,
I don't think it's an issue.
I think it's a bit of an issue.
Bring Sisay back.
I think it brings Sisay back, which is nice. But I'm also not a huge fan of a bunch of decks being able to play one-sided null rods that coincidentally win the game if they stick for a turn cycle.
I don't think they instantly win the game.
That's the thing.
I think there are too many creatures that get committed to the board. Like you'd have to in combination you'd have to wipe the board or something.
Okay, I guess maybe we should provide some context.
Sure. Okay. Yes.
Karn, Mycos, and Flatus in 2v2 Commander, which has wish boards, has been like an enormous problem. Where like everyone's on it, and it's just like such a free roll. But in that format, you have 2 opponents and 1 person who can try and protect it, rather than like 3 people trying to kill it.
Yeah, they can't block for it, but they can.
Yeah, they can't block for it, but they can like, a reasonably common play pattern is like you play the Karn, it has to survive like the one attack from your next opponent. Then your partner like starts using removal on the next player or whatever, where like you're essentially facing down like you're facing down somewhere between half and 1.5 players like being able to attack it with their board state, whereas in cEDH you'd be facing down 3 players being able to attack it with their board state.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm just super hesitant to
like, I don't know, if you have the board stall to like, the one it would potentially be a problem in Kickar because the deck has no troubles making the mana or the blockers.
That's a big one. Is that
it'd be a problem in Kickar, and all the like good mid-rangey type decks that actually can put up the power and toughness, like.
But also,
I think it'd be okay. I think it'd be okay in Kess.
I was about to say, like, I feel like it's like pretty good in Kess when like you're already playing the board wipes and your commander's a big chonky boy / girl that can just sit and play and block for him as well.
Yeah, / girl. You're already ahead of the curve when it comes to toughness.
But like, I don't know. You play Karn, you go to, even if you go up then down, it's at 4. Like most of the time, people just be able to go wide around.
Or like, but like, also the issue with Karn here that I can see is like, you can also have a play pattern with if you're playing a deck that can empty its hand enough and do whatever enough, and like do whatever else enough, is like you can down tick for an Ensnaring Bridge first.
Yeah,
which I think is a large issue, right? So I think like in like if you're playing like Karn in an Urza deck, where you have the ability to dump your hand to make a lot of mana easily and then protect it if needed. You can go like, okay, like play Urza. This is already a very fat body to block stuff. Play Karn, down tick, get the thing. Yeah, get a.
Though admittedly, like that's still you're casting Karn. You're playing Ensnaring Bridge. That's 7 mana, and then it has to not even take 1 damage, and your opponents have a turn cycle to be ready for the Lattice. Like.
Yeah,
I think it would be like very good. I don't think it would be like literally everyone's on it and it's just like how half the games end that it is in 2v2.
Yeah.
Like, okay, let me put it this way. Yeah. If you could have Mycos and Flatus, or like if wish boards were allowed, I wouldn't put dealing with Karn, Mycos, and Flatus above dealing with Oracle Consult.
Sure. Yeah, I don't either. I don't think that it would go to like the top of the format in unhealthiness, but I'm not sure how much wish boards add to the format versus take away from it.
Yeah, they just don't add a lot for me. And like in casual, Karn Mycos would be a huge issue.
Yeah, that's just like totally not okay.
Yeah, it is a colorless combo that does just go into pretty much every deck.
Yeah.
That can put up the toughness.
And it's like, that's
and Mycos and Flatus is like not a cheap card as well. It's just like another sort of unhealthy.
Especially because like people Yeah, like people already talk about like how much they don't like playing against like Painter Grindstone after Painter unban. And like this is just so much more of an obnoxious thing to deal with.
Yeah.
All right.
Next.
So that's switchboards. Next we have the infamous tuck rule. For those of us who haven't been playing EDH long enough to know about this.
When you introduced the last segment, you were like, some people who possibly don't know that it's in the format or not. I thought you were talking about the tuck rule because it just comes up all the time.
Oh yeah, just like every time.
No, the tuck rule is no longer
in effect. Yeah, so the tuck rule, for those of you valued listeners who haven't been playing this format for a fairly long time might not know, the tuck rule was an old rule in EDH where you couldn't replace your commander going into your library in any way with it going to the command zone. Or your hand, for that matter. You could only replace your commander getting exiled or going to your graveyard with it going to the command zone. So there's a lot of annoyingness with that, with say Submerge plus a Force Shuffle effect, or just like anything that shuffles your
bounce
commander.
Plus Twister.
Bounce Twister, all that good stuff. Where basically like it makes it incredibly easy to like semi-permanently get rid of a commander without them really having any recourse against it. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like that's a good description of like why it's not great. Well, for casual EDH anyway, not a great rule for casual.
Honestly, I think it's kind of better in casual EDH.
Yeah?
Or I don't know. I think it helps deal with the like, the thing is that those effects usually suck. So like you have to make a deliberate choice, and then you're typically using them to deal with like some of the very high inevitability commanders. Like how do you deal with Maelstrom Wanderer?
Sure. Or like,
I think it does a pretty good job at dealing with like commander centric decks, and I feel like those decks are more like, I feel like in casual the incentive to play in fact the incentive to play casual is to play kind of a commander centric deck, and like no one wants their commander to be taken away from them.
But I think if you build, okay, I guess there's a difference between commander centric and commander reliant. And like, I think that when you get to commander reliant decks, things start to become like a little more unhealthy in terms of like inevitability. And now this is a problem that could just as easily be solved by the existence of more like land balancing type effects, because these commanders tend to be green, and it's like, I'll just ramp myself to the moon and then use my commander to just make up all the value. Like Maelstrom Wanderer or Angry Omnath, Marin to an extent, where it's like, I'll just keep casting her forever and she'll just pull stuff out of the bin. Where like, if there were more effects like Fall of the Thran, or like things that not like destroy all lands, but just like everyone goes back down to like 4 or 5 lands, or like a balanced type effect that only hit lands type of idea.
Sure. Or like limited resources but balanced, and not everybody at the table, but like per person.
Is it natural balance that sets everyone to 5?
I think it's natural. I think that's the green one, right?
Yeah, it's like, if only it wasn't green.
Yeah, yeah.
If only it was in like the color that most wants to not do that.
But yeah,
then like that would also be like, the tuck rule would also help address the same issue that those kinds of cards would help address.
I can see that
people just take advantage of the fact that you aren't allowed to really interfere with their lands and use their commander as like an engine that you can't effectively deal with ever. Adding ways to deal with it into the format doesn't seem terrible.
That being said, for cEDH, how I view the tuck rule is sort of an extension of like, the reason why the tuck rule was removed from the format is sort of the same reason why Karakas is banned. And I think it's pretty valid in that like, it just super disincentivizes you playing commanders that like it super disincentivizes you from playing commander-centric decks or like decks that really want to use their commander for something and need it in play to do stuff, which are already struggling really hard in cEDH. Like it's already very hard to justify playing a commander-centric strategy right now over playing generic value dot commander. And like the tuck rule really doesn't help that, where especially for stuff like Thrasios Timid decks, you don't really care that much if you lose one of your partners. Whereas
I
like
think you kind of do to an extent.
if you get,
I think
you definitely like you would. I guess you would
but
definitely
you care a lot less than you do in like any other playable deck.
like
honestly, because of console more than anything. Like if you're on just a pure Scepter deck, like I would be hesitant to drop a Thrasios if I don't have my infinite mana outlet.
Yeah, but like
Also, I guess
the issue is like even if you're hesitant to drop your Thrasios, everybody else is hesitant to drop their commanders, and you're very not hesitant to drop Tymna, right? Is the big one.
Of course.
The other issue is that like specifically in cEDH with Twister being so prevalent, you're not looking at people making the conscious choice to play like Chaos Warp or spin into Myth or whatever. You're just looking at random feel bads from getting yeeted by like a chains in response to a Twister.
Yeah.
Which is like not the way it's supposed to work. Like it wouldn't be people intentionally including these effects to deal with the problematic commanders that they're having trouble dealing with. It would just be like a random get punished for like someone just had the bounce spell.
I think Submerge is an exception where I think Submerge would definitely see an uptick in play for this, just because like I don't know, like
Submerge in response to a fetch
like
land
Gitrog cracks a fetch, you go great Submerge Gitrog, and they're like, oh okay.
Wait, no. You let the draw trigger resolve.
Oh, there you go. Let it resolve first, and then let them shuffle in, so they have just no chance.
Well, no, because if you submerge in response to the draw trigger, they just draw Gitrog.
They just draw what? Sorry.
They just draw Gitrog if you submerge in response to the Gitrog.
Oh yeah. Sorry. But yeah, like it's like just the worst. Yeah, but like that, I think that's basically my view on the tuck rules. Like it pushes cEDH into unhealthy directions that it's already being pushed into by default. Yeah, and it's just not
for like
really something
pretty
we want.
Marginal benefit. That's like, and it's, for all my talk about like how it deals with certain problematic aspects of Casual Commander, that's not what it will be used to deal with.
No, not at all. Next up, we got, oh boy. This is a 1. This is a 1. This one is a Soaring ban.
And also Crypt, because
also theoretically Crypt.
Banning Soaring and not Crypt seems silly.
Yep.
Let's keep it consistent.
So first of all, I want to put it out there that I don't think this is ever happening. I think that there have been far too many Commander products printed with a Soaring in them so far. That
are there Commander products that don't have Soarings in them?
I don't think so.
No.
I think every Commander product has a Soaring in it. So like just on that basis alone, for them being able to print Commander anthologies in the future, like I think it's not happening. But also like just everybody already owns one. It's so much work to just like get it out of everybody's hands.
I have like 5 or probably like 8. I don't know. I've got tons of Soarings.
But like, and it's not even like they're worth a lot of money, because they're not really. It's just like prying the Soarings out of people's cold dead hands is not something that you want to do.
Yeah, of course.
So,
but from the context of competitive, I think I'm a fan. I think
like
general.
Sort of. I've always held the belief though.
Commander's Arsenal did not have Soaring in it.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Exact one. I've always sort of been of like a split brain on the Soaring ban, where I think like the fast mana is probably too good. I think like it's less obvious now that Flash is in the format and all this stupid stuff is happening, but like I think as a baseline it's probably a bit too good. But also I have always thought that like banning out all the fast mana puts green so far ahead
Yeah, I think it's a fundamentally different format if you take those away.
Yeah.
And like maybe it is like a more fun one, but I think it's certainly like it's different enough that I wouldn't I would consider it something completely new.
Yeah. And it's like soaring's like a defining feature of like both EDH and cEDH.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And like I think we would need, in order for me to support this, we'd need like some pretty substantial other things to go first, because right now hitting soaring and crypt like disproportionately hits the decks that are trying to deal with the problem rather than be the problem.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, there's definitely like there's like other stuff that has to be fixed before you can consider doing this and having the format be balanced after the fact. And again, like I think like calling it the format after these get banned, I don't think is super accurate either.
I think a Soul Ring / Crypt ban would lessen the effect of your deck just straight up losing to Null-Rod.
And hot take, Najeela would be unplayable without Crypt.
Yeah.
No turn on Najeela, just unplayable. Can't do it.
Okay. No, but genuinely. Not unplayable, but I think that deck is like not good. And then 10% of the games where you have the Crypt, it's like just insanely strong. Like if you win like 75% of the games,
such a hot take.
If you win 75% of the games where you open Crypt, and that's like 10% of your games, then that's 7.5% on your win rate. That means that can cover on the other 90%, winning like 20% of your games or less. And if you won 20% of your games when you didn't have Crypt, you'd still have an average, slightly above average win rate.
I have like a very lessened version of that point where I think that Najeela is probably the best Mana Crypt deck, but I don't think it's necessarily a bad deck without Mana Crypt in its opener.
Okay. I think it would fall, like it would, whatever strength people consider it now, it would legitimately be like one step below that without Crypt.
I think you've been playing too much Team Turn 3. I think that's my opinion on that topic.
Sorry, like I mean, this is like assuming everything else is unchanged.
Yeah.
Obviously, everything else gets weaker.
Yes,
but I don't think anything else gets weaker by the same amount, which is Matt's point.
Honestly, I'm not sure about that. I think non-green decks really do get significantly worse. Like I think like Opus Thief actually gets hit very hard by soaring a Crypt ban.
Well, soaring and Crypt is certainly different than just Crypt.
Sure, but like even like just a Crypt ban,
both definitely hurt the deck.
Even just a Crypt ban, like it can still be so rough. Because like I found Storm, like in my time playing non-green decks, like burning E-tutors or Vamp tutors on Crypts is such a common occurrence that like having to downgrade that to tutoring to a Soul Ring instead is like a huge hit for all those hands.
I don't think it's that big a hit a lot of the time. Sometimes it is, but
I'm not too sure because like a lot of the time
like
it's a
as
color
someone who like
limitation
very
issue.
Consciously tries to tutor for Soul Ring when I think the life might matter and don't need it. Like I found most of the time it's really not that big a deal to just find the Soul Ring. Like there are times where I'm like, oh, I'm really glad I can find Crypt here and hold up 2 mana or cast a 2 mana spell, like go Crypt, Signet, whatever. But there are lots of times where it's actually not that big a deal.
All right.
I think it's more of a penalty off of a Nas. Like, I think if you have the cards, then 1 mana can be a big deal. Like, if you have the cards but no way of actually finding particular cards like Crypt, then for instance, like a reasonably like an okay Nas, I think that's a problem.
Yeah, for sure, Nas, like having things that don't, particularly when you have like 1 or 2 colored mana, having to turn having to use one of that to cast the Soul Ring, which in turn only makes colorless, is like a big deal.
Yeah.
It definitely matters for Nas a lot.
Yeah, like one of the 2 blue you need for Oracle or something.
Yeah. Good old, Basically just like fundamentally different format with this stuff removed on both sides. Yeah. All right. Let's do the next one here, because we've actually been spending a lot of time on this stuff. Yeah, so next one is Commander Death Triggers. So when commanders go to the command zone from the battlefield, they still trigger dies triggers when they normally would. Yeah, this one is also one of those ones that's just like a rules nightmare, right?
Yeah. I don't know how you would.
Toby Elliott, who's like, he writes large portions of Magic's rules and is on the RC, has like numerous times people go like, oh, well, you could do it this way, and he'll basically just be like, okay, does it work? Like, can it be stifled? Because we don't want that. And like, does it still work if there's a rest in peace out? And like, those 2 hurdles alone are already like so difficult to clear.
Yeah.
Without getting into like even more niche stuff.
Yeah. It's just so hard to make it work.
The technical burden.
That being said, so assuming this won't happen because of the rules burden, because of the intense amount of work that would be required to make it like happen and actually exist in a like realistic form, and ignoring all of that, how would this affect each side of the format?
Child of Alara would be absolutely miserable in casual.
Yeah. That's the big one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, just angry baby making everybody pissed off.
It becomes even more of just like a brain dead deck where
yeah.
It's like it's always going back to the command zone and it's always causing death triggers. Like, great.
Yeah, there actually aren't that many things that it would really impact in well, I guess it depends on if it's optional.
Sure.
Like, how does it work with like the God Eternals? Can you just, I guess you can just command zone them when they go to the library.
When they go back to deck, yeah.
Deal. Yeah, like there's really not a ton. There's Rolesk.
Yeah, there's Anax hardened in the Forge.
Oh, there's the Dragon Spirits as well.
Sure.
Those
Tuk Tuk the Explorer actually exists.
Does he though?
Hey, stop dissing my boy.
Sure. Yeah, so I don't think none of these would be particularly relevant.
not really.
No. One of those things that maybe it adds some small thing, but the technical burden I think is just way too high.
Yeah, it's just it's small benefit, large cost to making it happen.
It's like almost a little rule book you have to bring with you everywhere. It's like, how does
pretty much. Moving on. This is a big one. I think we this is like half coverage with Planeswalkers as commanders, but we'll do this a bit more. Legendary permanents as commanders, which has sort of been like discussed a bit. I've seen on like online discussion before. It's just, I don't know, it's just like not worth it to me.
Yeah, I also the reason I think it's good to separate these out, people often try and sort of roll them in with Planeswalkers as like all the things that are legendary that aren't creatures. And like, I don't think that's fair to Planeswalkers. Like, as you know, as was mentioned earlier, they're like characters that could feasibly command an army. So like, it certainly makes a lot more sense to have them be commanders than it does to have like Godsend be a commander, or like a random equipment, or like enchantment, or like just Paradox Engine,
or just a random land.
yeah, or like a land. Yeah.
The Tabernacle, whatever.
Just baby.
It's just like not really. Like I there might be some benefit, but I feel like a lot of it is just like weird, like probably a another set of weird rules interactions, and also just like a lot of it's just like a lot of the permanents that fit this build like aren't a lot of colors, so it's a fairly low benefit as well. Like a lot of it's just like 1 and 0 colors, especially for like lands.
I couldn't find a land that actually would be in 2 colored entities.
Yeah, unless you're kind of like the flip stuff from Ixalan, it's just
Yeah.
That's
like you'd have those. Those would be kind of interesting, I guess. Some of them, perhaps the Eldraine, the legendary artifacts from Eldraine, you could do some interesting stuff with, like the Great Henge or the Magic Mirror. Embercleave just sounds miserable, and like in casual, there's always going to be that guy who builds Mindslaver, and that's just going to be no fun for anyone.
Yeah, that's just like cool, but worse. Like worse for everybody else at the table.
So much worse.
I think there are like a lot of cool casual decks, though there are going to be some like really annoying ones.
I feel like there are a lot of like high power decks that would actually be like pretty cool.
I think the issue is like when you start adding legendary permanents to commanders, I think like there are a few that are like interesting and are worth building around, but I think the vast majority of legendary permanents that you're adding in just like are so far from being a commander.
Yeah.
Like comprehensively.
And like also it's definitely like a really scary thing for that to be the rule when like they can just print.
It's so hard to like design around in the future as well.
Like I don't know how there's like a Jeskai Ascendancy that's legendary. Like, oh, whoops. Like or some like Intruder Alarm type effect in Bant that's legendary. Like or like there's so many ways that it can just go wrong so fast. Yeah. Or like just a miserable legendary land.
It limits wizards from being able to like print like, oh, we want this effect in this format. Well, we also don't want multiple of these in play at once, so let's give it legendary. Oh, well, I guess we can't do that now. Huh. I guess we just can't print this card. Welp. Yeah, it's just not great.
Yeah, I guess like what it is that legendary, like enchantments, artifacts, and lands are much less rigidly templated than creatures and planeswalkers, where like there's a limit to what those will do.
Yeah.
And like eliminating that limit from potential commanders puts us in some scary territory.
Okay. Well then, I think if that's all we have to say on that, then that is our main topic for today. That was potential rule changes. Let us know in the Discord, by the way, like what you guys think of all these topics, because we actually, contrary to what you might believe, we do read that stuff, and it is interesting to us to read. So
some of us,
some of us, but seriously, like, come in,
or on YouTube, where like, we do read the comments.
Yep.
Sometimes I check Twitter, so that theoretically works.
We do, we check Twitter enough of the time. But yeah, if you like. Really, if you want to get a discussion on this, please do. Come on to the Discord. It's linked in the description on wherever you're listening to this on. And
come yell at me about Najila.
Come yell at him about that take. Talk about like what you would like think is interesting as a rules change for the format, because it's pretty neat. That being said, it's time for our favorite segment. Get check.
It just doesn't feel right without Lyndon saying it. It really doesn't. No offense.
I get it. Yeah. Fine. I see how it is. Okay. So here's the gut check for today. What is the worst deck and or card choice that you've ever played in a tournament?
Oh. Okay. I mean, like, yeah, not including, or like not exclusive to Commander.
No. Just any.
How
any
rigidly
matchup.
Are we defining tournament?
It has to be a sanctioned tournament or equivalently sized event.
Like, does game day count?
Like a cube draft count?
So something that you preferably paid entry to and paid money to compete with. Yeah,
like
sure.
Yeah, like I think it was like a 5-round Swiss.
Sure.
Sanctioned event at a store. Okay, then that makes my answer pretty easy.
Okay.
Oh man, I bet I could find a really bad one. 1 second. I have all my old standard decks. You guys go first.
All right, Morgan.
Yeah, so I went to I'm not sure if it was Journey into Nyx. It might have been Born of the Gods game day. So it's a standard event. With 4 trait doctorings in my deck.
Oh my god. That is incredible. Do you mind expanding on that?
Blue-white Cypher Heroic.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like, obviously, Hidden Strings was, like, what made that
Yes.
deck actually, like, not literally the worst. And then, so it's just, like, play Favored Hoplite, Phalanx, not Commander, whatever it is. The
Sure,
2-drop that
yeah.
has Heroic, put a counter on your team. A bunch of Heroic stuff, and then as Heroic enablers, I had some combat tricks, and then I had a lot of Cypher cards and some double strikers, like Favored Hero. So then you double strike with Cypher cards, you target a bunch of stuff. You get to untap, so your creatures have pseudo vigilance. And yeah. But Trait Doctoring is truly an awful card.
Oh, just the absolute worst. Just so bad.
I definitely, man, if that deck could have had 8 hidden strings, oh baby, it would have been good.
All right, Matt, do you have yours yet?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I do.
Go for it.
So I played 3 main board Skylashers in my RTR standard deck because I was too annoyed of my spells getting countered.
Oh,
and I decided that Skylasher was the way to counteract this particular problem. It as a side effect is okay against mono blue Devotion, which was a deck, but that's about it. It has 2 power and 2 toughness and dies to Supreme Verdict just like every other creature.
Nice. And for me, I think it would probably have to be a stretch of time when I was bringing a playset of Fiery Tempers to Pauper weeklies when Gush and Daze were still legal in the format.
That's not good.
No. So imagine a format where you could be playing all of Gush, Brainstorm, Daze, Ponder, Preordain, Gitaxian Probe, any of those cards that I chose to bring Faithless Looting and Fiery Tempers instead. Yeah, that didn't go well.
I think I need an honorable mention for my my entry into the Spike Feeders organized cEDH tournament with a Quicksilver Gargantuan in my deck.
Oh yes. Beautiful. Oh man.
Such an essential card.
It's so bad.
Literally
I
can't
really wish I didn't have to play it, okay?
literally cannot replace it.
Also, in my defense, I was drugged.
All right. Moving on to listener
on
questions for this week. We have a couple of good ones here. We'll get into it. So, first of all, we have from Z Wells 3, Zachary from... He's from Kingston, right? Kingston Playgroup?
Yes.
Yeah.
Friend of
Yes.
the show.
Friend of the show. Zach. For each of you, what are your top 2 or 3 cards that make your 105 card deck but always end up getting cut? It's a good one, actually. I think a lot of the time, for me, it actually, as weird as it sounds, it ends up being like 2 CMC counter magic.
Yep.
For me, it's always Shadow of Doubt, the big one.
Just always gets there.
Okay, the number one for me is always Muddle the Mixture.
Really?
Yeah, that's a big one too. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I guess
see, this card just it's I think this card's awesome in high power.
It took so much for me to cut that from Kess.
It's a great description.
Like, finds both halves of Scepter.
I guess my bar is just like too high. I don't know.
Like, I'm Reed. I'm just so good at this game.
I don't know.
I'm above playing Muddle to Mixture.
I just never consider putting Muddle into my decks. I don't know. Yeah. Maybe that's me.
I think actually a legitimately powerful card that just by preference doesn't make it into a lot of my decks is Grim Monolith. Just like not for any particular reason, like besides preference.
I feel like
I don't start with Grim Monolith in my decks generally, and then add it.
That's sort of the same for me. Is like I feel like it's the opposite, where like I won't start with a Grim Monolith and then like realize into testing that I actually really need a Grim Monolith to make the fast mana happen.
Yeah, for me, recently it's been Hushbringer. That's one that I've just been like, I'll throw, and I'm like, no, it shuts off like these 3 critical cards. That's annoying.
Just keep going down the list, and eventually you get to a point where you cut it instead of making all those concessions. It's rough.
Yep.
Next up from Daniel R544, we have: Does Angel's Grace have a place in non-Adnods decks as a way to combat Thassa's Oracles and other one-shot win effects? I'd say no, personally.
Yeah,
I'm gonna say no.
I'm on a no. That card doesn't really do much besides
I'd rather
counter Thassa's Oracle.
Trick Bind like 1,000 times over, and I don't want to be on
I
Trick Bind either.
really like Trick Bind more than it. I don't even particularly love Trick Bind that much, but I do like it more than Angel's Grace without Adnods in the deck. It's just a bit too narrow. I know, like, the Thassa's Oracle ubiquitous. Everybody needs to be playing it. Yes, but like also there are going to be a lot of times when you're playing against non-Thassa's Oracle decks or decks that have any alternative plan, and you're just going to feel real bad about having it in hand.
And also, it's like just not okay to tutor for. To like you tutor for it, you dunk on one Hulk player, and then you realize you burned a tutor. And they're like, or like, assuming everyone's on Thassa's Oracle, which is where you'd want it. If you draw it, fine. But like, if you're tutoring for it, then you just lose to one of the players you didn't dunk on.
Yeah.
Like, it's hilarious.
It's not even a band-aid. It's just kind of a coincidence of decks that already run Adnods.
Yeah, like I feel like this card, you think about dunking on someone with it, but then like you don't think about what happens after that, which is like 90% of the time you still lose that game.
Yeah, actually, the last time I cast an Angel's Grace, I think what happened was in that game, there were 3 Oracle players and an Animar, and one of them like visibly drew a Angel's Grace like off of a bob, and so it stopped anybody from going for it. And then one of the Oracle players manually killed the other guy holding up an Angel's Grace, like through combat damage, just regular damage. And then I tried to dunk on them, and then we all died to Animar. It's just like that. I feel like that's very indicative of how like Angel's Grace actually tends to play out as a hate spell.
But if there's anything you can take away from this, it's you should be mystical tutoring for it instead of vampire tutoring.
Oh yeah. Oh, the perfect answer. All right, and then last listener question that we have is from Pokanda Jones, which is: how would you each rank the tutors? Considering how many tutors you play in basically every deck in the format, I'm curious to hear how y'all think they stack up against each other. I think we're not going to do a super in-depth thing on this.
No, I think honestly we'd also have pretty similar answers. Like we'd have variants maybe at the lower.
There's a couple like ideas I had about, interesting like ones where we might have different perspectives. The best tutor in the format, what is it?
This is where we're going to start.
1 and 2 actually are pretty close.
Yeah. Start at 1 and 2. Well, I think this is also like a very contentious. I think there's 2 extremely reasonable answers here.
Sure.
Yeah, Demonic Tutor and Vampiric Tutor are definitely my top
they're
2.
1 and 2.
I think Vampiric Tutor is better, considering the available decks.
I think it varies based on the deck that you're playing them in. Personally,
no. None of that middle of the road fence sitting nonsense. Pick one.
I like Vamp a lot more in Tymna decks. I like D-Tutor a lot more in non-Tymna decks.
All right, so pick one.
Right now, Vamp.
Vamp.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I'm on Team D tutor.
Yeah.
Like overall, yeah. I think in a Timna deck specifically, I would prefer Vamp, but I think on balance across all the decks, I might find myself playing D tutors definitely.
See, I had the same thought, but all the decks that I'd find myself playing are all Oracle Hulks, so
Wow. I feel like we're learning something about you, and it's not how you rank the tutors.
Are we really learning about me, or is this just already known information?
Okay. Of the 3 restricted color top deck tutors,
yeah,
what's your ranking? Or yeah,
good question. I think
restricted non-black top.
I think E-Tutor's at the bottom of the list. I think it's probably Mystical Worldly E-Tutor.
Yeah, I actually don't know if Mystical's better than Worldly Tutor right now specifically. Like, I think Worldly Tutor is definitely really. I don't know. That's hard, man. Like, I think if I didn't think too much about it, I'd say Mystical Tutor, but I bet there's a chance if I spent a lot of time thinking about it, I could see an argument for Worldly Tutor.
I'd actually put Worldly Tutor at the bottom. But maybe that's just a consequence of like the decks I tend to play.
It probably is. I think it is very much a preference, or like based on the decks, yeah.
Yeah.
But like even in like decks where I would have thought Worldly would be great, like very creature centric decks, I'm still like, man, E-Tutors.
That being said, yeah, it is actually like it is a strong play to tutor for things like Remora, early game. It doesn't feel that bad, and I suppose it can go in. Actually, you know what? E-Tutor doesn't really see much play, I think, in like Storm decks, just because they're not really. Maybe that's not true. I don't know. It's hard to say.
I feel like it doesn't see plain Storm decks because they're not white.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna. That's what I meant. Like, that's what I was gonna say. I think Worldly Tutor is really strong, just because of Flash.
I think that's fair. I think
maybe I'm not familiar with all the Flash lists,
fair.
But like I think that's why it's at the top for me.
Okay, do you put Imperial Seal above all 3 of those?
I'd say
yeah.
I think that maybe changes on whether or not I'm playing Timna 2. It also I think it also depends on what deck I'm playing. Because like if
I think seal is like such an easy thing to it's just so easy to seal and pass if you really have to. I don't know.
That's fair.
Like I think seal is
I'd probably put seal above overall.
Okay, of the 2 bad blue tutors, being Personal Tutor and Merchant Scroll, which one's better?
That's getting way more
Merchant
into the weeds
Scroll.
of like deck dependence, honestly.
I think often it's Merchant Scroll.
I think overall it's Merchant Scroll. I think if you are specifically like playing a deck with a polymorph in it, then Personal Tutor is obviously better.
I think that like Personal Tutor, I think that Merchant Scroll's better in decks that like don't want Merchant Scroll.
Yeah, like they're pretty mutually exclusive. I don't know.
Sorry, what?
No, like Merchant Scroll is like the better card in the kinds of decks where like you probably don't want to be on Merchant Scroll.
Oh, sure.
Oh, wait, you play Merchant Scroll on Kess though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I guess that's like a note. Well, I mean, I'm on Paradoxical Outcome. That's why I'm on. Like, I wouldn't be on it if I wasn't on.
Without Outcome, yeah.
I don't know. I'm on Paradoxical Outcome and Intuition, and like those are both
and
not,
High
like,
Tide and
yeah, sure. I'm running a lot of
Frantic
cards.
Search.
Yeah,
I'm running a lot of cards that are not common to a lot of.
Although,
like, honestly,
Morgan,
if you're on Frantic Search and High Tide, I feel like you're just on Merchant Scroll.
Although, Morgan, do I have inside information that you might no longer be on those cards in Kess?
That is
all right.
Well, actually,
Oh
I haven't
God.
actually built that in.
Okay,
but very shortly.
Very shortly.
I have built Kick-Our Storm, and now I have to build Kess Consultation.
He's fallen. Actually, I think it's pretty interesting. I think like Kickar is probably the more interesting Storm deck than Kess is.
Yeah, me too. Manual Storm is a lot more fun when you don't have black.
Yeah,
like
hard agree.
Yeah,
that's not a hot take.
Yeah,
that's just
fair.
a fact.
that's just
hard mode Storm. Yeah,
facts
sure.
with Into the North. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's about it for listener questions, which means it's time to wrap up the show. That about wraps up the episode. If you guys would like to reach out to us with any questions, comments, or concerns, you can contact us on Twitter at Into the North Pod, via our email at intothenorthpodcast@gmail.com, or on our Discord server, the invite for which will be found in the description for this episode. An extra special thanks to all of our patrons who help cover the expenses for our show and allow us to work towards improving the quality of the podcast. If you too would like to become a patron, we are at patreon.com/intothenorthpodcast. Thank you as always to the band Vox Cadre for our lovely podcast music, to Nate Slover for our equally lovely podcast logo, and to our long-suffering editor, Roadkill. Next episode will be out in 2 weeks. Until then, see ya.
See ya.
Bye.